Here we're looking at the analysis of paper and some of the properties of paper, specifically how it can help us with forensic science. So first off, there's types of paper, and there's many types of paper. So you might be thinking of the paper you're taking notes on, but there's inkjet paper, there's bond paper, there's wax paper, there's filter paper. There's many different types. So this just shows you some of the variability, or the extreme variability, but even within, for example, inkjet paper, there is some variability. So these paper additives, so paper have things added to them. The seasonings makes the surface of the paper less porous to ink, and this allows handwriting and printing to look sharp and clear. This can be something if we're looking at a note, we might notice something like this. There's fillers added that add color, surface texture, and durability. And there's coatings. These coatings help improve the look and surface properties of the paper. Coatings make the paper more suitable for copiers, or printers, or even normal handwriting. The image that we see here, we can see those layers may not be consistent throughout. Some could be of various thicknesses. This can also play an important role in identifying the paper. So we've been talking about paper. Well, what is it in general? Well, pretty much it's made of wood and cotton, and at least those are the most common ingredients that make up today's paper. Now the amount or the type can be a little bit variable, but those are the general components. There's also common additives to paper, and these are chemicals that affect the color, the occupancy, the strength and durability and brightness, and they are part of the paper producing process. Things to consider with paper, looking at typically the thickness is the first thing that you may notice. Thickness is measured sometimes in GSM, or grams per square meter, or a caliper, or referring to the thickness in thousandths of an inch, and you use calipers to measure that. We can see here greeting cards being very thick and heavy, and tissue paper being on the other end of the spectrum here, being a lot thinner, and this for a lot lighter in grams per square meter. The texture of the paper plays a big role when it's printed and how it looks when completed. There can be coated and uncoated textures. The coated allows inks to kind of dry on the surface, where uncoated, those absorbed fibers get into the paper, into the fibers that we can see here in a little bit more of a detailed view. Often this means the inks will appear more vibrant and intense in coated stocks, so this is just something to consider when you're looking at the paper, or if you're looking at handwriting or ink used on that paper. Then we also have the brightness. So the brightness, you could think of this as like the wattage of a light bulb. Brightness is the volume of light reflected off the sheet of paper. It's a 0 to 100 scale. It's a measurement of reflectance of the blue, which is shorter wavelengths of the visual spectrum at 450 nanometers. What does that translate to? Well, here's a paper of 100 brightness. Here's one of 90. We could see the 90 is duller in appearance than the 100. There's also finishes that might be put onto paper. So these are other things to consider. We have the uncoated, the matte, the glossy, and the UV gloss. Paper's finish, this is referring to like the sheen, or how shiny the paper is when it plays a role in the readability and the look of what's printed on the page. The difference between uncoated, matte, and gloss is primarily the amount of coating that is applied to the paper. We could see here these different types shot under the same light. You can see clearly it being reflected at the greatest intensity with the UV gloss, and pretty much non-existent on the uncoated, and barely visible at all on the matte. This just shows the kind of example of the coating on how that can impact the shininess to that paper. We also have shades of white. So the paper, what's written on white paper? Well, there is a bunch of different types of white paper. If you've been to a paint store, you know the plethora of amount of options you have under simply the color white. There's variations that include common like soft off-white, there's silk white, soft asparagus here, antique white. You can see a large variability here. So they're also often considered part of the natural color scheme and are very common types used for paper. You also want to consider the occupancy of the paper that you're looking at. High occupancy and low occupancy. High occupancy is going to block a lot, and low occupancy you're going to be able to see through it. And it's referring to the degree of obstruction of light that's expressed as a percentage. So for example, something as 98% occupancy means that 98% of the light cannot pass through the paper. Low occupancy means the paper will have more show through. So this is can be like a simple little light test. Look it up under the light and see how easy it is to see through. High occupancy is going to be like your business or cardstock that's going to be really thick and dense paper, and low occupancy, as you would hope it would have, would be like tracing paper, something very thin so you can see through it. Last thing you want to consider in certain papers is the potential for a watermark, which is a unique image in paper that appears at various shades of lightness and darkness when viewed with transmitted light. Watermarks can be used on postage stamps, currency, and other documents. It's very common to find them. A lot of times money is used to kind of help prevent counterfeiting, but there are some companies that do put a watermark within their paper, sometimes in the corner, sometimes in the entire background. It can be difficult to see, but if it is present, you look under the right light, you'll be able to find it. And all of these factors can help you identify paper and match it up to something that might be found at a crime scene versus a stock paper source.